Hi, my name is Gary Stewart, and I am the founder and CEO of Founder Tribes, a mobile app that provides founders across the world with access to the feedback, networks, and capital that they need to start up and scale up their businesses, all from their mobile phones. We exist to empower entrepreneurs of all races, genders, geographies, religions, sexual orientations, and any other such consideration that really should not be taken into account when determining whether or not an entrepreneur is potentially a unicorn founder or otherwise valuable, because we understand that while talent is distributed equally, opportunity is not. And we are here to change that, which is why I am so excited to welcome this panel with the student and alumni entrepreneurs who are truly changing the world. These folks know more about entrepreneurship, certainly than I did when I was their age, but also more than many founders. And most of them are still students who can't even legally drink in the United States. I'm not sure that what exactly they plan on doing, but I am sure that one of them can become the next Mark Zuckerberg, who famously started Facebook while still a student at Harvard. We're also lucky to have this panel be moderated by the brilliant duo of Danielle Hawley, the Dean of Howard Law School, and Anulika Ajufo, the Chair of the Board of Governors of the University of East London. Danielle is a founder herself, being one of my co-founders at the Yale Black Political Forum, which we started when we were students at Yale. And Anulika has been on both sides of the table as both an impact investor and an impact entrepreneur. And both Anulika and Danielle are among my best friends in the world. So it's really great to have them with us today. But before I pass it over to Danielle and Anulika, I'd like to give you a peek of our Founder Tribes app, which you can already find on the app stores. And by the way, that's Anulika's voice that you hear narrating the video.
We live in a world where more than 500 million entrepreneurs will never get access to the feedback, networks, and capital they may need to realize their dreams. Talent is distributed evenly, but opportunity isn't. Founder Tribes exist to change that. Our mobile app can be accessed by anyone, anywhere in the world. It all begins with a founder submitting a pitch that will be evaluated by a community of entrepreneurs and investors relevant to their vertical and stage. Through the app, each founder gets qualified feedback about which areas of their business might need improvement, in the form of how many people swiped right or left, and in the form of ratings on each key element of a business plan based on Sequoia Capital's evaluation system. Each founder is then offered a personalized selection of video tips from world-class founders who explain how they've overcome similar challenges. Our professors are truly world-class and include such names as Stacey Abrams, Steve Blank, Jen Wong, and Anne Wojcicki. If a founder wants more support, she can access our curated database of coaches and mentors and set up one-to-ones, all via the app. Each founder iterates her pitch until the community of entrepreneurs and investors say that she is investment worthy. We'll then introduce her to relevant funders appropriate to her stage and vertical, including venture capital, angels, and alternative finance. We already have paying customers, including Capital Enterprise. And our investors include American unicorn founders such as Sander Daniels, founder of Thumbtack, which has raised $436 million from Sequoia Capital and Google, Zach Bookman, founder of OpenGov, who has raised $140 million from investors including Andreessen Horowitz, executives like Jamie Broderick, who is the former head of wealth management at UBS UK and Jersey, and Dana Wagner, who is currently the chief legal officer at Impossible Foods, which has raised $1.4 billion from investors like Serena Williams, Katy Perry, and Jay-Z. We are leveling the playing field for entrepreneurial talent. So download the app, accelerate your business, and empower yourself.
And now, without much further ado, I'd like to introduce you guys to Danielle and Anulika, who will introduce our amazing panel of speakers who will answer the question, or at least talk about the fact of how exactly should you be pursuing entrepreneurship while you're still a student, and especially when you're a student from a diverse background. Danielle, Anulika?
Thank you so much, Gary, for that introduction. It's just a pleasure to be here with you. And I'm just so excited for the beginning of Founder Tribes, which is an amazing app. And I just love to reinforce the message of Founder Tribes that we all equally have talent, but opportunity has not been distributed equally. And it's an amazing thing that you're doing with this app. And I'm thrilled to be here with Anulika to be a co-moderator for this panel.
Absolutely. And just to echo that, actually, just thinking about the way that Founder Tribe seeks to really level that playing field. And it's just an exciting opportunity today to be moderating this panel with you, Danielle, and to hear from such fantastic young Black and brown talent who are slaying in their respective lanes. And so I think with much further ado, we can introduce the panel. Right, so we have Brihu, Javon, Shruti, and Raghi, Ime, Adam, and Moses. So I have intentionally not introduced what you do because we want to give you your time to shine. Okay, so we'll take it in turns and you could introduce yourself, starting with Brihu, right at the top. Hi, Brihu.
Hi, everyone. My name is Brihu. I'm currently the president of the Yale Entrepreneurial Society. I'm extremely excited to be on this panel and have the opportunity to speak with so many amazing peers. Personally, one thing that I love about entrepreneurship is the concept of being able to take an idea, grow it with a team, and really just take it to market. It's very inspirational. It also just brings it's a really big form of self-expression, and I think it's just phenomenal. Personally, a couple of things that I'm really interested in are in the education space. Ed tech is a big place for me, and another place where I also feel like there's a lot of work to be done in leveling the playing field, especially on younger audiences. And that's personally one place I'm really passionate about, especially with the Yale Entrepreneurial Society, making sure that everyone from any background and from anywhere, that they have the opportunity to build the idea they want, have the resources, have the network is something that we're extremely passionate about. And it's been a phenomenal journey so far, and we're really excited to make it happen. And really happy to be here.
Thank you, Brihu. And Raghi?
Hi, everyone. I'm Raghi, a second year at U Chicago, majoring in economics. I'm the co-founder of Talklet. Talklet is a mental wellness platform that connects qualified listeners to people who want to talk and feel heard. Talklet ranked third at U Chicago's College Venture Challenge and raised $10,000. I'm also a member of the board of directors of a healthcare nonprofit called Nature Claim. Nature Claim empowers consumers to be confident in the safety and efficacy of the dietary supplements they purchase. And it's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you so much for that, Raghi. Shruti?
Hi, everyone. I'm Shruti. I'm a first-year student at Stanford, and I'm the founder and president of Makers of Tomorrow, which is an organization that seeks to empower underserved youth in the Bay Area with hands-on STEM education. So I'm very passionate about the education space and using entrepreneurship as a vehicle to make a positive impact in the community. And I'm also interested in exploring the digital health space. So I'm part of an organization at Stanford that promotes some health-related entrepreneurship and just seeks to create a space where both medically inclined students and business inclined students can collaborate to solve medical problems. And I'm really excited to be here.
And we have Jaron.
Thank you. Hey everybody, I'm Jaron, recent grad of Cornell University. I studied computer science there. I graduated in May of 2020. Upon graduation, I turned down the opportunity to kind of go out and kind of be in the software industry as a product manager, and instead raise a little bit over $500,000 to start ColorStack. ColorStack is a nonprofit with the mission to increase the attraction, retention, and success of Black, Latinx, and Native American computer science students. Our vision is really around seeing more Black and Brown students choose computer science, stay in that major, and graduate and launch successful careers in engineering, research, and entrepreneurship, like we are here today talking about. So that's kind of what I do in my free time. I play tons of video games, stream on Twitch, things like that. So thank you guys for having me.
Oh, thanks a lot for that, Jaron. Very inspiring. Ime?
What's good, everyone? My name is Ima Essian. I'm a student at Morgan State University and a student partner with HBCU VC, a student-run venture fund dedicated to HBCU, historically Black colleges or universities, and Hispanic-serving institutions, or HSIs, student founders, and also the former co-founder of Vera Convey, a carpooling app that participated in the Vision Accelerator last summer. Really happy to be here with some of my good friends on this panel, so this is awesome.
Ime, I love your energy. Thank you for that. Adam?
Hey everyone, I'm Adam. I'm currently a junior at UC Berkeley, studying cognitive science and sustainable design. I'm the founder of Presk. It's a platform focused on reducing friction in pretty much every design vertical. And I think to some of the things that I really love, I love linguistics, I love accessibility, and I love design. And Presk is really a platform to wrap all of those up into one. So really happy to be here, super excited to talk to everyone. And yeah, just really interested in getting into it.
Oh, thank you for that, Adam. And last but not least, Moses.
Hi, everyone. My name is Moses. I'm a second year at Wharton doing my MBA. I'm also the founder of Eden Care, and essentially we're offering value-based healthcare to employers in Africa. I am passionate about the African continent. I'm passionate about healthcare, and I'm passionate about travel. And Eden Care marries all three into one. So happy to talk to you.
This is incredible. I mean, just absolutely amazing to have all of you here and to hear about your startups and what you're doing as entrepreneurs. And so I want to get started with the first question for the panel, and just feel free to jump in. So the first question is really, how do you balance your work as an entrepreneur with your life as a student? I know some of you have already graduated. And what does being in a university setting add to your entrepreneurial experience? I know some people have the argument that maybe you shouldn't even go to higher ed, that you should just begin your kind of startups right out of high school. And so I think we're looking, to hear, what did you get from kind of starting a business while you're also experiencing higher education at the university level?
I can go first. That's a really easy question for me, because our philosophy at HBCUVC is that anyone should have the opportunity to try and start something, and even to fail. And I think so much so of ourselves, we have the expectation that you're building like the next Facebook or the next Google in your dorm room. And I know for 100% certain that's not going to be true most cases. And so I think what's really important for students to understand is just to go do things. Like, that's what you should be doing all the time. Like, the only way to learn how to build a startup is to start a company, like, honestly. So that's why I did. That's why I advocate for anyone else to do. So that's the game plan.
I love to see you here representing for the HBCUs and HBCU VC. Thanks a lot for that, MA. Who's next?
Happy to go next. So Eden Care is my second startup, and all the startup, even the first startup, was just as I was leaving my undergrad. And if I think back then and now, what I found to be the most useful thing about starting while in school is the community of people to bounce off ideas from, bringing that diversity of thought, and also just the network, right? That ability to tap into 1,000 people's network and leverage that to getting your idea off the ground. So, and I also think you also have freedom, in terms of just the time,
right,
the mind space to be able to do that. So yeah, I think it's a great idea that more students get involved in entrepreneurship if that's the path that they're looking to go down.
That's great.
Absolutely not. I resonate exactly a lot with what you may say, and also Moses as well. I think one of the biggest things are the people that you're exactly what Moses says, the people you're able to talk with is something that you really only get in a collegiate level, and just the amount of people that you can say, hey, I have this idea, you want to work on it together, and I think there's a lot of universities do a really good job building and allowing people to have those conversations. I think that's just such a strong suit of actually being able to build, have, and kind of grow an idea. So no, resonating with exactly what Moses and Eva are saying, I think the people that you're able to talk with about an idea, especially when you're really early stage, can be very reinforcing and kind of give you that initial fuel to get something off the ground.
That's great. Jerome?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, great points already. I think the one I would want to emphasize as well is just the freedom piece of just being a student. When you're working full time at a job, the lifestyle's a little bit different. You have bills, you have, different considerations to make. Whereas if you're a student, everything was kind of paid for in advance in most cases. So food is there, housing costs are there in most cases. So, it's kind of a different, a more flexible environment, lifestyle that can support entrepreneurship. But the second thing I would say about being a student is that somebody told me this last year, and they were saying, make sure to get all of your calls, all of your networking or whatever done as a student, because people love talking to students more than anybody else. And that's like, an insane advantage that we have, or I guess I had as a student, where I might be able to reach out to this random founder, this random VC who wants to support me as a student that may not have taken my email or call 2 years later. And so even if it's a 5-minute thing, even if they just connect with you on LinkedIn, try to get these initial connections, because it's easier to follow up on a past conversation as a full-time professional than it is to kind of cold outreach as, some random 24-year-old, right, 25-year-old to these people. So that's one piece of advice I got, and I tried to take advantage of that, especially my last semester as a student.
That's fantastic. I need to connect you with the Howard Computer Science Department if you're not already in touch with them. Shruti, Raghi, Adam?
I was just going to say, I think it's kind of to Jaron's point, being part of the university social fabric, especially as far as entrepreneurship goes, is like a huge asset. I think being able to network in college is a superpower. Like Jaron said, getting all of your phone calls done in college is I think the best way to get kind of institutional support, especially for technical ventures. So I think, one of the best things that I've been able to do is reach out to computer science professors here who are able to deal with, these design problems that I've only been recently introduced to, but they have been doing research on for years, right? And they're able to kind of point me towards their graduate students. So I think that's been really helpful for me. I think there's also a lot of synergy, in being part of that entrepreneurial social fabric. you asked about time management as a student and a founder, right? And I think a really big part of that is dealing with school as kind of your 9 to 5, right? So being able to take care of all of your schoolwork, all of your studying, and completion of all your assignments in that 9 to 5 span, and then being able to kind of be part of that network of 5 to 9ers, right? That are working on their company or their venture or their club after that 9 to 5 grind of school. And I think being a part of that community is super important, because there are highs and lows, and being able to celebrate those and bring those into conversation is super important.
That's great.
Yeah, I definitely echo everything that everyone has said about the importance of networking. And I think even though like my college experience so far has been purely virtual, it's been really powerful to see, like even virtually, there's been so many communities that I've been able to join that promote collaboration and entrepreneurship. And I think especially at Stanford, entrepreneurship is kind of an underlying theme in everything we do, from classes to student clubs. So in terms of like managing and balancing academics and innovation or entrepreneurship, it's all sort of intertwined, I've seen in my experience so far. And in classes, like they'll literally like just put a plug, like this is a startup idea potentially, so think about this, or like make a group and discuss this potential idea. So I think it's a really powerful space to, again, bounce off ideas with other students and always have those opportunities to connect with mentors. And yeah, it's been a really powerful experience for me so far.
That's great.
Yeah, I could agree more with this. I mean, Talklet as an idea came up at an entrepreneurship class. And after going through the class, we figured out that this was something that we're passionate about and we want to continue with it. And of course, it's helpful to take other classes that we think would complement our knowledge, would complement the experience that we learn as we go on. So that's something that's very helpful in terms of university life.
Wow, that's fantastic to hear. And if I could just ask a follow-on question to that, to the panel. So I don't know if any of you are familiar with Julian Docks, are you? And he penned an article titled "Entrepreneurship is the Future, Education is Not," where he wanted to go down the medical track, and he just felt, racking up all that debt when I could actually just use my skill set, build something, and escape that death trap, essentially, would be the way to go. And so now he's an author, he's on his second book, and seems to be deemed to be successful. So you've just said that you feel that education and being in higher education has been integral in your ability to do what you do, because there's the freedom element and also the ability to network at this stage. So for somebody who's thinking, right, I'm going to be listening to Julian Docks, I don't want to rack up this much debt, I probably just want to go and try. If I fail twice, maybe that's 3-4 years, I'll land somewhere. What advice would you give to them? What would you say? Starting with you, Jerome.
Yeah, I think the interesting thing about what we said as a positive for school are these things that they isn't necessarily by design, I would say. I don't think the school necessarily is designed for us to be entrepreneurial per se, but I think we there's some side effects that allow for student entrepreneurship. So I would caveat that by just saying, like, there can be better ways that they can actually design curriculum and the ecosystem for us to be more entrepreneurial as part of the college experience. But if somebody's looking to forego that whole experience altogether, I think the key piece is community. Like, I think it's hard to do entrepreneurship by yourself. And I think all the points that were brought up by the panel were, benefits of having somebody to reach out to, whether we're talking about customers, co-founders, somebody touched on, potential investors, potential employees. Like that's all about community and network. And I think it's funny because when I was thinking about going to school and applying, I was going down the path of saying, oh, I'm an entrepreneur, I don't need to go to school. It's the same thought that we're talking about here. But I think some conversation that I had with my mom over time was like, well, yes, this may be expensive. Yes, this may be less than ideal, but how else, as of that moment, recent high school grad, were you gonna get in touch with this many people at once and be able to learn in this capacity at once, right? And so I think it really is dependent on your ability to kind of get the knowledge, resources, and community that you need to try and fail and kind of move forward. And I think, don't get me wrong, social media has definitely removed a lot of those barriers, right? Like Clubhouse, you can connect with anybody anywhere in the world nowadays. So I think 4 years ago was a different conversation, but today leveraging social media, I mean, there's things like what's that? A lunch club where you can actually connect with people based on professional interests. So I think just coming up with a strategy for actually connecting with people and putting yourself out there is what I would say should be your number one priority, and just keeping your cost of living down as well, so that you can continue to try and fail without putting yourself in too much debt or anything else from the personal side.
Well said, Jerron. Ime? You knew I was going to call on you, didn't you?
I think for me, I think I interact with people who dropped out of college and people who also don't drop out of college and work on their products and that kind of thing. And I think it's just a personal choice. Like, I know people who like would strive in that environment, and I know for me, I would not be able to do that because I need structure, I need the support system, and I think I would succeed more with the resources that my university and my community can provide. So I think it's just a personal choice, and I think whatever route you go down is that you should have just be able to go all in and like really put your full effort behind it.
Thanks, Ime. And I'd vary the question slightly to you, Moses, as an MBA student who presumably this is your second or third degree. Now, the UK, I'm in the UK, and the UK is somewhat different. The entrepreneurial ecosystem is somewhat different from the US. So we have something called HESA, which is the Higher Education Statistics Agency. And they state that on average, a student founds a business in the UK every 2 hours. So if I was to extrapolate out to the size of the US and just knowing your pedigree, I cannot imagine it must be every second, right? That a student must be founding your business. Now, just Moses, to you, right? As an MBA student that's doing stuff in Africa, and presumably you lived in Africa. What's been your experience of the US ecosystem, and do you have any comparison to anywhere else?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. So I've my experience has been largely Africa, UK, and here in the US now. And I'd say the biggest sort of difference that I've seen between the three ecosystems have been the US is very brand driven than anywhere else. So having the right, university next to your name drives a lot of introductions and drives a lot of access than it would, someone who doesn't have that brand name, right? And I've seen this in just conversations with investors, someone trying to make an introduction to, a strategic in a different setting, right? So if I think back to, experiences on the continent and in London, I felt like, yes, brand was important, but the other aspects that you brought to the table were also heavily considered. But I feel like when I've moved to the US, a lot of the introductions start with, he's a Wharton MBA, because that's sort of the brand that everyone sort of recognizes immediately.
That's great. I want to kind of follow up on that question. And this is interesting, just listening to you introduce yourselves. I found that one of the commonalities among a lot of what you're doing is that many of your businesses are socially conscious, right? So you're not just trying to kind of make money for yourselves, but you're also trying to open up access to other people for education or business, et cetera. So I want to start with Shruti. Tell me why, focus your entrepreneurship on something that actually helps others. Is that, as a Gen Xer, I'm wondering, is this a Gen Z thing that, your businesses help other people? I think it's one of the best strains about this generation is that so many of the startups that I see are really things that are good for community, good for the world. So Shruti, what motivated you when thinking about having a startup that really helps others?
Yeah, so I'd say I credit a lot of it to my high school experience and the way that kind of service and community outreach was the central emphasis almost. And when I was learning about entrepreneurship in high school, it was always in the context of doing some sort of social good. And I think that perspective was really valuable because even now, like when I think about doing entrepreneurship in the medical space, I'm always thinking about access and how to sort of bridge those inequities, even in the context of like diagnostics or like making therapies. So yeah, I think in high school, like making this outreach organization was really powerful to like create a community of Gen Z people. So like all my peers who volunteered with me were also kind of having that socially conscious mindset. So I think that was a really nice space to be in. And I definitely think like other generations too were really valuable mentors for me while I was doing this. So I'm not sure if it's just a Gen Z thing, but yeah, I think there was a lot of mentorship that I received that was really helpful for me to grow the organization as well. So yeah, I think socially conscious mindsets are really like integral for me in terms of entrepreneurship.
That's great. Adam, Ragi, Brigu, anyone want to jump in?
Yeah, I think it's actually kind of a funny question. You framed it like it's such a crazy thing, right? Having a social
Greed is
consciousness.
good. So the days when I was growing up, it was all about Wall Street, and the theme was greed is good. So that's why, coming from that perspective, that's why I asked it in that way.
Right. And I totally understand. And I think, as we realize how damaging greed can be, I think that's what precipitates a lot of these socially conscious, socially responsible ideas. I'll even go back to the last question, honestly. You talked about, why it's important to go to school, right? I think as a founder, it's really important to have this kind of like wide context, right, in which you're able to build your company in this wide frame. And I think going to school allows you to build that frame. For example, I'm in a political ecology class, and I'm learning a lot about socio-natures, right, and indigenous cultures. And as a designer, it's super important for me to understand like the history of design, because what a good designer is able to do is take an idea or take a client's idea and understand how to communicate that idea in the highest resolution, right, to the world. But I think part of that is about understanding like, these ideas at this point, in 2021 need to be much more than just economic engines. Mm-hmm. I think it's a little difficult in a capitalist society to work, that kind of ideology into your company, but I think it's totally possible. And I think that's what Gen Z is really focused on. I think a great example of that is Duran's company. And, I think there's ways to kind of weave social consciousness in everything that we do. But I think to Shruti's point, accessibility is the most important part, right? So, I like to look at design as an energy that has entropy. I think Founder Tribes has the same philosophy, right? So we have this kind of, untapped entrepreneurial potential. And the only way to reach that is through these kinds of radical, movements for accessibility, right? How do we unlock that latent, entrepreneurial potential? How do we unlock that potential in every vertical, right? So that we have these geniuses that are around the world in Africa and South America who are able to use the same platforms that we can use. Because at the end of the day, I think a lot of us are building for impact, right? And when you're just affecting the 1% or kind of the peak of the long tail, you're not really making any sort of impact, right? So I think that's the point of accessibility. I think that's why accessibility is such a theme, because I think we realize that, at the end of the day, we're all the same anthropologically. We all bleed the same blood, right? So being able to unlock that design entropy around the world is the key. And, I say design entropy because I'm a designer, but I just mean really the energy that's in every kind of entrepreneurial or social vertical, right, that we're trying to impact. So I think, that would be my answer to the question. But accessibility is the key, and I think social responsibility should be the key pillar of every company, and building that diverse, company DNA really early on, so that we have these diverse ideas. And I think all of us here, we know that diversity is the key to impactful solutions. So that's definitely what I think.
I love that. Anyone else?
Yeah.
Or Jerron? One of you was going next.
Oh
yeah, I can go next.
Go ahead, Raggy.
Okay, thanks. So, of course, echoing to all these points, I think impact is a huge thing for us as Gen Z. I mean, right now we're facing a lot of society-related issues, a lot of accessibility-related issues. So there isn't really too few ideas that we should work on. At that point, I think for a lot of us, if it's not about creating impact, if it's not about making change, then what's the point of it? I mean, sure, profits are great and fundraising is fun to some extent, but if it's not actually creating change, then what are we even doing here? And I think every one of us has created a startup that they actually value in terms of the impact that they're making. For me and my co-founders, the mental wellness space has a lot of accessibility issues, a lot of stigma related issues, and so we hope that Talklet could solve at least a small part of this like sector and create change and inspire hopefully others. Yeah.
John?
Yeah, I wanted to just say one thing, one plug that people should check out, one resource, the Long-Term Stock Exchange, founded by Eric Ries. And I think I'm not going to go into kind of what it is, but it's kind of the future of what public markets can look like and what companies can be, what standard companies can be held to. And I think that is an interesting thing to research so you can kind of see where capitalism, I guess, is kind of moving towards. And then the two things that I had directly to answer your question are, it's kind of a macro and micro response. So from the macro level, I think, with capitalistic economy, like it's all about market forces and what the market wants, right? And I think there's this individual interest that I'll touch on, but I think also you're seeing a lot of success from, I mean, people wouldn't start companies if they didn't think they could be successful, right? So I think it's the market actually telling us that it's not just about giving us the best product, right? We want to know where those materials came from. We want to know, what you value as a company. We want to know, are you against racist practice? We want to know more. And I think that's just entrepreneurs like us in this new era responding to the market, right? And then there's at a micro level from the individuals. I think, we want to see. I think entrepreneurship in general is all about solving problems, and I think what you're seeing from this generation is these are the problems that we're dealing with a lot more, right? Like I feel like for myself, maybe if Black and Brown CS students weren't underrepresented in CS, right, I wouldn't have started ColorStack, right? I'd probably be starting something else. But that's the problem that me as an entrepreneur that I'm facing, and I think the easiest way to kind of show the difference in a lot of the entrepreneurial communities is, when I was back at Cornell, I started this club called Black Entrepreneurs in Training. And so I had already been in the entrepreneurial ecosystem at Cornell in general. And so a lot of the non-Black founders, you could see the difference in the types of companies that, that they're starting, right? So, for a lot of the students that I was mentoring, it's like, oh, I want to solve, Black mental health problems, or I want to solve, inner city kids access to education. Like it's all these like social justice issues. Whereas, some of the non-Black founders that, I mean, I'm friends with them. It's not anything against them, but they don't have those problems. So the problems that they want to solve are like, convenience things, or how can I turn this into a SaaS product? Like, what I'm saying? Like it's also a product of your environment, what problems you actually are facing, and what you're seeing around you.
It's so interesting to me, and I'm going to turn it back over to Nilika, but I think one of the things that I'm hearing in your answers is that so much of how we used to, the government was for solving problems, right? And I think one thing, as a lawyer and a law professor, what I think is, these are the things that we used to say, let's pass a bill and do it. Let's, send this to regulatory, so if we're trying to fix an issue with let's regulate it more. And I think one thing that this generation is touching on is government has failed, right? In lots of ways, either it doesn't want to take responsibility or it's not particularly good at it. And so business is stepping into places that we used to see as more the responsibility of the state. And now we're seeing business come into that space and saying, and I think particularly your generation has faced so crisis, environmental, economic, dealing with diversity and race, that you're now saying we need to solve these problems for ourselves. And part of that is doing it through entrepreneurship. And I think that's really powerful to say, these are problems that we've identified, like what Raghi was talking about too. And now we're trying to answer those questions, solve those problems for ourselves. Nilika.
Thank you, Danielle. It's interesting listening to you all respond, because then as I'm doing the math on Gen Z, I'm thinking, wow, you would have been growing up in a world just post the 2008 crisis. I actually worked at Lehman Brothers, by the way, so I was one of those who had to carry their boxes out the door. So, just thinking about the way your mind, your mindset is shaped by your experiences. And just listening to you all talk, I just think that there's hope for this world still. Because as an impact investor, when you sit in certain rooms, and I've worked at Goldman Sachs, and you name it, where I've sat in pretty much the capitalist world and then sought to bridge into impact investing, where it really is about having that social conscience and thinking about the way you do business better while thinking about putting private capital to work. And so just bringing all that together to think about a key question, right? Sustainability. Because you have these fantastic ideas, and it's clear to me that, for example, Jaron, you would say that your startup is a not-for-profit. So even though that you're making money, you're just putting that right back in the business. The aim of what you're doing isn't to generate super returns, which is fantastic. But at the same time, you do think about your sustainability, and that's where fundraising comes in. Ime couldn't stop talking about the fact that you've raised, I think you raised about 500K seed. So just want to talk a little bit about fundraising and how you found that generally, maybe starting with you, Jaron, because we know that you've done that. And Ime will pass over to you, and then Adam.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you. And thank you, Ime, for the pre-session bio. But yeah, so I think, there's so much to unpack that. I don't want to take too much time, but nonprofit typically has the connotation of, raising $5, $10 from the, average person. And it's all about feel good money and things like that. But I think, my experience has just been finding mission aligned, vision aligned entities, whether that be in high net worth individuals or companies, where you can find the synergy in the work, right? So if we succeed, that company, that person also succeeds somehow. Like, I think that's the way that I've approached it. And so about 60% of the money that we've raised actually came from partnerships. So it's an actual strategic value proposition that, we can provide to that company, and they can provide to us in return. And so that's just a product that's being sold at the end of the day, as opposed to me trying to convince somebody that, oh, this is for the greater good. Like, hopefully, they'll, send us money again next year. That's a little bit harder of a conversation, because, when they don't feel good about it anymore, then you lose the money. But if I can pitch it as, here is why this will help you in the long run, it's easier to kind of raise capital that way, and especially long-term capital, when you can pitch them on a vision for how to benefit them years from now, right? And then
how long did it take you to raise your round?
Yeah, so it took we got our first blank check. So that's actually something that I think is huge, that a lot of underrepresented founders don't have access to, like, the family and friends style checks that you get from people who just believe in you. So I got a check from a Microsoft Tech Fellow in January that just said, hey, I don't care what you're doing, for-profit, nonprofit, here's the check, let me know when to send it. And then we finally finished, I guess, getting the last few checks in about August, September. So it was kind of an exponential kind of curve, though. It was that first check, but then it took a long time to raise the rest of it. So yeah, that's how long it took. And I think it was a mixture of, like I said, the companies, about 60%, and the other 40% came from actual individuals, as well as nonprofit grant-making foundations.
Fantastic. Thanks, Jaron. Ime?
Yeah, so as a founder with Your Convey, and as an investor with HBCU VC, I always tell people, I always think about, like, how do I bring investors or bring people to my company? And that simply is just have customers, like, really build a product that people want and want to see. And that brings everything that you want. If you want investment dollars, you want more people to join your company as employees, and that's how you get people to work with you. I think also, there's also lots of great opportunities for, like, grant funding out there for student entrepreneurs these days, and also with, like, accelerators. The accelerator I participated in, I have to give them a shout out, is a Vision Accelerator. It's for student entrepreneurs, for minority student entrepreneurs, and they give out like $10,000 in equity-free grant funding. So you can, like, start your company with $10,000 in your bank. You don't have to give it back to them. It's just free money. So, like, it's really cool to have a program like that set up for students to, like, go and try out and do an idea.
Fantastic. Thank you, Ime. Adam?
Yeah, so great question. I love what Jaron and Ime had to say. So at Presk, we're still just bootstrapping. So we haven't gone for any VC dollars or even any grants yet. We have our eye on a few things. Because we're a software platform mainly, built on other development platforms, there's things on the market that are really awesome, like the Epic Mega Grant, for example. Unreal Engine is a real-time development platform that we've kind of thought about using, and they have a grant for users of their development platform. So that's definitely something that we've been interested in. But as far as your early question was about sustainability, and I think I touched on this maybe earlier, but I think a big part of sustainability is building that extremely strong company DNA, like super early on. And I think it also depends on how you frame your company. So for a really long time, Presk was just a project. And I think that really changes like the pacing of everything. It also changes teaming, right? So like setting expectations for your team, setting expectations for how they're going to be compensated like very early on, and kind of, changing the framing of how you're working on the project. Is this a project? Is this something that we're just working on as a 5 to 9, or is this something that we're going to get seed capital for and then all quit our jobs, and go work full time on this? So I think that's been really important for working on sustainability. I think, Jaron touched on clarity of vision. I think that's really important. As a designer, I'm super big on crystallizing vision. Our pitch deck is just a video. So I think that's been really important. When we're looking for engineers, when we're looking for researchers, we could just show them the video and they understand the 10-year projection in like 3 minutes or less. So I think that's been super important. And I think that's really important for establishing that like long-term company sustainability, where we're kind of getting the vision out super early on so the engineers can say, okay, I'm bought into this. I can work gratis or for X and Y early on before you guys even start raising your seed funding.
Wow, thank you, Adam. Please send me your pitch deck. I'd love to see.
Will do.
Thank you. And Moses, last but not least, again, I know that you raised a pre-seed and are in the process of raising a seed round. Tell us about your experience.
Yeah. So I've had the privilege of having raised twice. Well, first time, and now in the process of raising our seed round. I find that the process right now is much faster. How to think about framing the business, how to think about talking to investors, who to talk to, is much more crystallized in my head than it was the first time. The first time, it was a jumble, to be honest, and just because it was a first time, it's a completely new experience. No matter how much you watch videos, until you walk into that room and the investor throws the first question, you're always never ready. But I find that with this, with this process that we're running right now, that very clear on what we're going after. We're able to have very clear conversations with investors. We've done a very good job at segmenting who we're talking to. And I think that has made the process much faster than we'd even anticipated ourselves. And also, I guess compared to the first time, to my first startup, just the environment has changed materially, right? There's a lot more people looking at verticals that no one would have looked at before. The investors who are looking at emerging markets who typically would never have looked at emerging markets. So the environment is much more conducive for, if you have the right vision, if you're able to frame a very clear investment and business case, for you to be able to make a pitch.
Yeah, and just to add to that, I think, there's never been a better time to start, join, or fund a startup as a student. I really think so. Given the macro, given, what's happening with liquidity and so on. That's not the discussion for today, but it's a really good time. And I think just to give you a fun, when I was doing the research for this panel, one of the stats I came across from PitchBooks was that 9 out of 10, consistently over the last 5 years, 9 out of 10 of the top fundraising universities for student startups are in the US. The only one that's outside of that is in Tel Aviv, so that speaks volumes.
Absolutely. I want to jump, we're almost to the end of the panel. Brihu, I want to get you into this conversation and ask you what advice, and this is going to be for the panel, but I'll start with Brihu. What advice would you give to student entrepreneurs looking to launch a startup in this climate?
I think that's a great question. I think, especially from myself personally, I think a lot of my friends and just in general, I think there is a little bit of a gap in terms of theoretical versus practically what to do. I think practically there's a lot of things where along the lines of these are the steps that you can take, and there's a rough outline, but practically on how to actually achieve those or maybe do's is not as defined. And especially for if you don't necessarily have big networks to kind of ask people about your product or just in general, it's kind of hard to take those initial first steps. And something that I think I found really interesting in kind of my own experience is finding really scrappy ways to do things. Actually, people resonate with that in a really good way. And maybe like a quick example of that would be if you have an idea and you don't necessarily know like who to talk with it about, like just going on Facebook, finding like some group and messaging people like, hey, I have this idea. Would you be willing to give me 5 minutes of your time where I could just have a quick conversation with you? And it's definitely intimidating, but there's a lot of things that I think you can do to take those initial first steps. And once you get one really great conversation with a completely random person, and random people are who you need to be talking with a lot of times to really understand if your product or what you're doing is really going to serve them. It can be really inspiring and push you a long way. So I think if I could give any advice on kind of taking first steps is, once you kind of come up with the idea, find maybe first like 20 people and have conversations with them and just try to get a conversation, understand what their pain points are. And then that will, I think for very early stage things like that really kicks off a really good cycle in terms of what can I do next? What should I do next? I can go back to these people now because I've had a conversation with them. And that really starts a really self-sustaining cycle in terms of getting started. And I think that's the hardest thing. There's a pretty big activation barrier, especially for earlier stage. And starting companies are a really intimidating thing. So getting over that initial activation barrier. And I think a lot of people in this panel have done such an amazing job. Like they're just so far ahead, but that initial hump is really, really important for a lot of people. And so I think the first thing is have the idea, be able to pitch it, and then talk with as many people as you can is the best first step you can do. And that'll really open up a ton more doors to kind of pursue the idea.
That's great. Raghi, advice for other student entrepreneurs. Oh, Raghi may be frozen. Shruti, do you want to jump in?
Sure, yeah, I can jump in. I resonate a lot with the point that there's not often a well-defined path to take like your theoretical idea to the practical market. And I think especially at Stanford, like even though entrepreneurship is quite ubiquitous, there's often like that creates more de-emphasis on like mentorship and how to get your idea from like just your classroom to the actual marketplace. So I think especially for students who don't have those networks, as Brihu was saying, or who don't have the experience or are not from backgrounds where entrepreneurship is like the thing to do, I think it's really powerful to bounce off your ideas with peers first, as Brihu was saying, just like, talk to someone and just like get their feedback. And yeah, I think if there are mentors available to you, definitely avail of those opportunities. And I think even if like there isn't a set clear path, I think like as you go along and as you talk to more people, that will kind of manifest, hopefully. So yeah, just keep an open mind and like be optimistic about it.
Very good. Anyone else?
I have a quick point. So I'm trying to phrase this right. I think, be big in your vision, but small in your execution at the earliest stages. And I think with the rise of a lot of no code platforms like Airtable and even things like just Google Forms and all these Zapier with, connecting different APIs, like I come across a lot of student entrepreneurs that want to, build an app from day one. And I'm like, is there a way that you can still deliver that value by just manually matching people, in that Airtable spreadsheet, or, just doing a landing page to gain interest and get more information? So I think, Brihu's point, 100% +1, like start with talking to customers so you can understand these pain points, but even after that step, like it's not necessarily that you need to build an app, especially if you're not technical yourself. Like if you're not technical yourself, like I wouldn't recommend going out and trying to now hire an engineer and paying all this money to get that done. Like how can you do that with less tools that are in most cases free, especially as a student with student discounts? So big with vision, small with execution in the first days.
I love that. Raghi, you're back with us, so I'll let you answer that question next. What's your best advice?
Yeah, for sure. Just try to find the problems that were caused by COVID-19 or dramatically increased by COVID-19 and try to fix those. You will find a lot of traction, a lot of investors interested in this. Also, just find something that you're passionate about, even if it's something that's really important and everybody wants to fix it, but you don't feel that you know about it that much, or you can't really imagine yourself working the next 10 years on it or so. Find something else, because there are a lot of issues out there that, like, there are abundance of them, so you wouldn't really worry about that.
That's great advice. M.A., Adam, or Moses, advice to the next generation of entrepreneurs?
Yeah, happy to jump in. I think it's important for people to have like a social group that they can always talk to. And I think this should be peers, because one, mental health issues as an entrepreneur, you're very lonely. And just having peers who have seen you through that journey, I think it's extremely important. So I think if you're going to start out, know that it's going to be lonely, and just have that small group of people that you can go to, talk to about the idea, and they'll help you think through some of the things that you might not be thinking about, or sometimes just they become your accountability partners.
That's great.
Fantastic. So I've been taking notes, and so far I've stolen 2 quotes from you all, and I will be using them going forward. The first is Adam: diversity is the key to impactful solutions. You will be seeing that somewhere, rest assured. And I think just the second is be big on your vision and small in your execution. Jerome, I could not have said that better. I'm going to be using that. And so just, we're in a pandemic, guys. This is kind of my last question to you all. We are talking about opportunity. We are talking about, big ideas. That there's never been a better time to be an entrepreneur. But we are in the middle of a pandemic. And also, I would say, I'm a millennial. And for you guys, this is like unprecedented by just miles. How are you? Ime, I see you laughing there. I mean, how
He's been laughing at our generations. I'm Gen X, you're millennial. That is funny to him for some reason.
There's no hate here. I just find it like I don't really take like ownership or identity in like the whole generational thing, because it just creates barriers between people. Like Adam said earlier, we're all human beings. Like, doesn't make me special being Gen Z or anything. And if I really think about it, I'm not really Gen Z because I was born in '98. Like, I'm 23. I'm a little old for this, so there's that combination.
We could give you Gen Y going on Z, all the same.
Of course.
Right. But I just, whoever wants to jump in, feel free. We're rounding up. But are you optimistic about the future? I mean, what do you see as the opportunities presented by where we are? Do you see more opportunities and challenges? Over to you all.
I could easily hop in on that. I think the answer is like, this has been it's been a crazy year so far with like the pandemic and everything, and I just like my whole family's been safe, and I really feel really bad for everyone else like who's been going through a lot of struggles and that kind of stuff right now. I think we all should be conscious of that. But like what's really cool right now is that we're accelerating like everything moving online, moving into virtual. Like Jerome said earlier, you can reach out to anyone on the internet these days. Like there's Clubhouse out there. Like you can send anyone a cold email. Like you have that. All these opportunities have been made more. Like even like with e-commerce, like if you launch a store on Shopify, that's how people get like their sales going on these days. Like that's what's so crazy about this. Like everything has been moving online recently. And so everyone should become a part of that and get involved with that and see like where you fit in that whole entire scheme.
So we probably have time for 1 or 2 more. Anybody else want to jump in quickly? Adam, you look like you want to go.
We're in a pandemic. You're right. We're in a pandemic. I think world is pretty dystopic right now. And I think, you know what? I'm an optimist personally, pretty happy-go-lucky person. And I think, you know, if we don't make it to utopia, I think we'll make it to neutropia, which is kind of the middle point between dystopia and utopia. So I think we'll make it there at least. You know, I think the world is ready for a generation that is going to take a lot of really big risks and build a lot of on the surface moonshots. I say on the surface because I think moonshots has an implication that it won't work out. That, you know, a percentage of the moonshots are going to make it, but I think there's a high percentage of extremely talented people in this generation. And I think a lot of these moonshots, a lot of these big ideas are going to work. So I think, you know, I'm optimistic for that to happen. I think there's a lot of change coming, and I'm hoping we can make it to neutropia, at least.
Hopeful. We will keep engaging on that front and see if we get there, Adam. And last, over to you, Shruti. Any comments?
Yeah, I really love the neutropia aspect. I think that's definitely something that we can all aspire to do. I think like not being too hard on ourselves during the pandemic and not setting like these goals and then being disappointed if we don't reach them. Like these are unprecedented times, obviously. Like we can't do everything that in a normal situation we may aspire to do entrepreneurially. But I think just being that optimistic that we're going to get to that neutropia, and when this pandemic is over, like we're going to have so many new connections that we formed virtually that we can now avail of too. And I think that there's so much power in how we've been able to network over Zoom and like make connections internationally that maybe we wouldn't have been able to do in normal times. So just focusing on the positive, and hopefully when this is all over, like these entrepreneurial ideas can actually come to fruition in person as well.
I just wanted to thank the panel. This was an outstanding conversation. As you've seen, we're going over to Clubhouse in just a few minutes. But before we do that, I want to introduce Wendy Maldonado D'Amico, who is going to give us some closing remarks. Wendy, over to you.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much, Danielle. My name is Wendy Maldonado D'Amico. I am the Chief of Staff and Head of Marketing here at Founder Tribes. And I just want to say how inspired I am by everybody who spoke today. I mean, truly, all of you give me so much hope for the future. And I want to thank all of you for joining us for this incredible conversation to give us a glimpse of what's going on campuses around the country and the US. And, you know, hopefully we will be expanding to students from other countries as well. Wouldn't that be incredible to get the international injection of spirit and innovation here at Founder Tribes? So thanks to our moderators, Danielle and Anulika today. And I'd also like to thank Rihu, Jiran, Ragi, Adam, Shruti, Ime, and Moses for joining us. We will be hopping over to Clubhouse to continue this conversation immediately following this session. I also wanted to flag for everybody that we have an event coming up on February 25th with the Nobel Peace Prize nominee, Stacey Abrams. That will be hosted by Startup Grind. You can go to our page, to our events page, foundertribes.com/events, and you can look for the event there. Look for your special code to get you in for free to that incredible event on February 25th with Stacey. And we are hosting a Clubhouse event immediately afterwards with New York City officials. And then I just wanted to make one last plug. If you have not done so already, please download our app. It is available on the App Store and Google Play. We would love for you to upload, if you are a founder, talking to you, students, and your friends, please download it, upload your pitch. Our community wants to hear from you and see what you're up to. And we want you to try it out. We want to hear from you and see what you think. So with that, I'm going to close it out today. Thanks to everyone who joined us online. And we look forward to seeing you over on Clubhouse right now. Thanks, everybody. Bye.